All right, so this, of course, is the big story that we are tracking on Fineprint tonight. Ever since the war started, the United States of America has been urging both sides to not let the conflict spill into other parts of West Asia. Even during Joe Biden's trip to Israel, the American president, in fact, warned of grave consequences. For context, let's in fact show you the map of West Asia. Now, these are the major countries. Israel is marked in one color, Gaza and its supporters in the other. These leave out only Egypt, which has acted as a mediator between Israel and Palestine in previous conflicts. Now, Cairo also controls the only functional crossing with the Gaza Strip. Now, as you can see on your screens, West Asia is a pretty complex region. History is testimony that a single conflict does not remain confined within borders of a nation. It has multiple fronts, there are proxy partners, and there are huge vested interests here. The war that is playing out at this moment is no different. So while the United States has warned against a spillover, the Pentagon has gone out and carried airstrikes in Syria, a country that has a long history of proxy wars. Now, we don't, of course, have the time to go through the many proxy wars in Syria, but let's in fact break down where Syria fits in this Israel-Gaza conflict. It's twofold. One, the Syrian government is a long-time supporter of Hamas. It does not see the group as a terror outfit. A lot of nations around the world don't see it as a terror outfit. It is the United States and its allies who see Hamas as a terror outfit. Damascus sees Hamas as a revolutionary movement that is fighting for the liberation of an independent Palestinian state. The second reason is, of course, Syria's age-old animosity. Now, Syria has not seen eye to eye with Israel since its creation. And this, of course, brings us to Iran. Syria and Iran have come closer under Bashar al-Assad. Firstly, he welcomed the Iranian military into Syria to lay the foundations of Hezbollah. And then Iran helped Assad quash the civil war in the country. Now, on Thursday, airstrikes Washington hit these Iranian-controlled buildings in Syria. This is what the Americans claim. Pentagon has said that 2 weapons and ammunition storage facilities were destroyed. The United States has said that these strikes were in response to recent attacks on its bases in Iraq and Syria. Remember, the American presence in both Iraq and Syria is widely unpopular with the local population there. Now, these incidents had no connection with the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, but that's the thing. Any attack in West Asia does not happen in a vacuum. It is bound to have an impact, especially when Syria and Iran both have been very vocal throughout this war. Now, Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has declared that his country defends the Palestinians. Tehran feels that the West does not understand the issue completely, and which is why their actions in this region should not be welcomed. The country's ambassador to the United Nations did not mince his words at the Security Council chamber.
The United States' unwavering support for the occupation and aggression has rendered it an active part of the problem. The U.S. has further exacerbated the conflict by overtly aligning itself with the aggressor at the expense of the innocent Palestinian population.
But this does raise a question. Does the United States genuinely understand the conflict, and is it only doing what suits its foreign policy? Now, Joe Biden has not changed his fundamental belief that Israel, of course, has a right to defend itself. But with the rising death toll in the Gaza Strip because of the American weapons that are being used there, many are questioning his no-condition support to the state of Israel. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is happening at this moment of the conflict and what are the American interests there, we're being joined by Mr. Joachim Bitterlich. He's joining us from France. He's a former German ambassador to NATO. Mr. Bitterlich, this, of course, is a key moment in this conflict. The death toll continues to rise. And what we've witnessed in the last 24 hours is that the United States, which has been saying that this conflict should not spill beyond the borders of Gaza, has also carried out airstrikes within the Syrian territory. How do we make sense of what the Americans are trying to do? On the one hand, they say they don't want this conflict to spill over, but their actions seem to be pointing to otherwise.
I'm convinced that the US are acting for the first time since years in a really, I call it, responsible way, with a certain self-restraint. They try to limit the whole Israeli defense they say, okay, Israel has a perfect right to defend itself against a terrorist aggression. But on the other hand, the Americans are limiting, trying to avoid what I call a blind vengeance, revenge, as the Americans had been doing themselves after 9/11. And therefore, I think it's for the first time that an American president is proceeding, let's call it, in a statesmanship. And I compare his attitude to that of Bush Sr. and to Clinton for the first time since 20 years. For me, it's astonishing. The real enemy on the other side is Iran. And this is interesting. When you look at all the powers involved, you have a certain number of mediators, Egypt, the Qataris, the whole Gulf, include to this Saudi Arabia. And on the other hand, you see Iran, who tries what I call to be the number one in the whole Middle East, with devastating consequences.
Right.
With regard to Syria, you can immediately include Lebanon. The only case I have difficulties really to understand is Turkey. Is it, again, because they feel, let's say, not enough considered by the Americans or by the Israelis? I'm questioning myself about what's the attitude, what's the response of Erdogan. I'm astonished here.
All right.
Totally contradictory. On the one hand, now he's beginning to ratify the Swedish accession to NATO. On the other hand, he is being, let's say, the defender of a terrorist organization, which is Hamas.
Right. Now, I think you've touched upon several aspects of the complex geopolitics of West Asia, but I want to, in fact, focus, on the conflict at hand. The United States has, of course, given its unflinching support to the state of Israel, not only its support, but also a lot of the weaponry that the Israelis at this moment are using has, in fact, been shipped by the United States of America. The Americans have been shipping weapons to Israel for those to be dropped on the Palestinian territory of Gaza from day 2. Now, with the rising death toll, how much further do you think the Americans will continue to back the state of Israel before some kind of a ceasefire is called?
I think the support is not unlimited. The Americans deliver arms, yes. On the other hand, they tell to the Israelis in a clear way, please, where are your limits? Please observe humanitarian law. Please observe international law. And they warn the Israelis of any, let's say, massive incursion in the Gaza Strip. The Americans begin to understand, and this is for me the key. The Americans, by the way, as the Europeans, as some others, are beginning slowly to understand the mess we have. We are co-responsible. Let's tell it like this, for the situation in Gaza. And it's interesting for me to see, when you look at the deliberations of the Europeans, for example, that suddenly the two-state solution is back. It's back on the agenda. It's back on the agenda, and suddenly all the sides are saying, well, even the Americans are speaking now again about what I call the two-state solution that we have lost. And this is, for me, as an observer today, it's the critical view of foreign policy of the last 20 years. Right. Till 99.
My quick follow-up question, Mr. Bitterlich, because you've been an ambassador and you'd understand diplomacy better than most other people. The interesting bit that you said is that the two-state solution is back in discussion again, but the fact is Israel has continued building more and more of its settlements that have been deemed to be illegal by the United Nations. Two-state solution is not possible if these illegal settlements continue to be built. Do you think the United States at this moment is serious about a two-state solution in Palestine?
I think so, yes. The Americans are, let's say, beginning again to understand what has happening since 1999, since the last failure of the negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians under U.S. chairmanship, under Clinton at that period. And I think since then, and you can link this to one name if you want, and I know what I'm now saying is politically perhaps in Europe not really correct, it's linked to the name of Netanyahu. Till Rabin, we were really honestly negotiating the two-state solution. And since the assassination of Rabin, let's take these 2 years till 99, and since then, no one is speaking anymore about the two-state solution. And we have admitted in Gaza what I call a no-future solution. Right. And we have even admitted step by step by the settlements and others a no-future situation in Cisjordan. And therefore, for me, it's astonishing now that the Americans, even the Americans, not only the Europeans, when I read the conclusions of the European Council, it's interesting, we are back to square one.
Right.
But we have lost 20 years.
Absolutely. I think you've been really candid, but we are completely out of time, Ambassador. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and getting us those insights there.
With pleasure.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.